This is going to be another short video about prepping for my dream game. Next month I'm going to have a bunch of free time and I'm going to make some long videos and it's going to be great. This month though, I'm just kind of, well, barely getting by. We'll get into the video in a second, but if you don't know who I am, my name is Helper Wesley, I've made these games, and I make weekly devlogs. When we left off in the last video, I was setting up the layout for what is going to be, hopefully,
my dream game.
It's not what it was when I first dreamt the game up, but it is a pared down, reasonably sized game for one person to tackle. So a large part of the art in this game is going to be what you see on the cameras in the consoles. Actually, it's easier if you go back and check the first video if you haven't watched it yet because I explain what the game is all about. The cameras will be used to check in on compartments in the research station that you're tasked with monitoring. And so I had to set up displays to tell you what was happening in the room, but before I got into the meat of coding in the controls for the menu, I went and tried to see if I could do this art for these rooms. Like testing out color palettes for the monsters that you'll be experiencing and seeing, I wanted to make sure that I was capable of drawing these rooms, because they'll be the majority of the stuff that you'll be seeing in the game, so they have to be nice. I realized while doing this that I need to go all out on the art, because as fun as it is to flick switches and read meters and dials and things, the game itself needs to be visually appealing or else people aren't going to want to actually sit there and look at it. And doing smaller scale things like the laptop that you see there, I found that those are a lot easier to do than these big flat surfaces, especially when you're doing the big flat surfaces next to these finer detailed objects. Like the laptop looks pretty good, but everything else in the scene just doesn't really strike me as being as good as it could be. And then I tried drawing just the outline of the character that would be in the station walking around and basically having to deal with all these things firsthand. And I tried to cop out with making the character just a silhouette like I did in other games, but I was kind of called out on that one by a few people, and I will at some point try to make a proper character model for them. I'm thinking about going with an orange jumpsuit and having like their head exposed, so that way I don't need to deal with the complications of like details in the clothing and stuff. But I will give that another try. I wasn't really happy with how this room was turning out, so I decided to go try another room, basically trying to do a bunch of different pieces to try to figure out what I wanted the whole thing to look like. But in the end that proved to be fruitless, and I ran back and just added some more detail to the first image and then put art aside after I got this. It's really not great, but it is what it is. So from there I moved on to the coding part. And if you've watched my videos before, you might have noticed that I'm floating in space right now. I'm not attached to some kind of gray screen. And this is an attempt to make it so that people who use Gdevelop can like see the code behind me as I'm working and maybe pause the video and like check and see what I'm actually doing and they can maybe learn from it. Basically it's to get people to hopefully stop asking for tutorials, because I would love to do tutorials. I love helping people, but tutorials just take forever to do and I just don't have the time for it. I'm sorry. This will hopefully make it so that I can show more of the code on screen and get rid of that talking head thing to kind of merge the two most boring parts of the video together and make it not as long. That's good logic, right? Put two bad things together and they'll come out as something better. So essentially what I finished for the main menu here in the middle was to make it so that these buttons here, when you click on them, they change a variable from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to whatever. And based on what the number is, it changes the display and the text and tasks so that each room that you click into gives you the information about the machine and the condition of that room. Speaking of which, I should probably share the philosophy or reasoning behind this whole thing. Someone asked me in the comments last time about whether or not the game would be fun to play. Like, would this sort of thing require playtesting to know whether or not this is fun? I mean, yes. I will need to have playtesting done to get the balance right. but the concept itself I know is rock solid. The concept comes from a practical exam that I took while going to university for marine engineering. Essentially, the exam was about monitoring these systems and checking to see what's doing what, and recognizing signs of an issue before they happen. But I went in like a cocky little butthead, and so the examiners, I know for a fact, took it harder on me than they did the other students, because when it came to my exam, I walked in and basically something was broken already, and the thing that was broken was a regulator for the temperature of a boiler, which is kind of important for a number of reasons, but essentially it meant that I was going to have to stand there and watch this dial go up and down and manually adjust the temperature coming out of the boiler. But everything else was still happening. There were things breaking all over the ship. So while I was standing there manually adjusting this console, I had to run around and check everything else in the ship constantly to catch things before they caught on fire, before issues happened, before things broke. And during the exam, I was sweating. I was running around like a madman. I was just panicking. But afterwards, I felt like a freaking god. I aced that exam, and I can tell you right now, that was fun. So I just need to get that feeling working in this game. So essentially in this game, there's going to be 3 big things to worry about. Your machinery, your power, and the crew that is working in the station. In this case, it's only one person, so you have one crewman working down in the research station. Everything else is supposed to be run automatically. So the trick to making this game work, hopefully, will be to make everything perfectly balanced, and then take that perfectly balanced system and start poking holes into it. And as the game progresses, there will be more and more holes poked into the system until you basically get to the point where you're frantically rushing between consoles and trying just to keep everything from going to hell. So I got the selection tool working for the middle console, and then I started working on the right-hand console, which is basically all the switches and displays for the resources and power that's being used, as well as the crew member. And these displays will essentially let you know when things are going wrong and what you should be worried about fixing. So obviously, if your station runs out of oxygen, your crewman dies and you lose the game. Likewise, if your station fills up with CO2, your crewman dies and you lose the game. And if the temperature goes up, you see the pattern. In the last video, I said that I didn't want to commit to the idea of making this game because its scope is still kind of big, even though it's not huge. But I want to put that to rest now because this game will come to life. Whether or not it gets to Steam, I don't know. But this game itself will definitely become a playable thing. If you enjoyed this video, maybe click on that subscribe button. And if you wanted to talk to me personally, the link to our Discord is down below. It's called the Game Dev Fireside, and it's a pretty chill place to hang out and talk game dev. And if you decide to click on that link, then I'll see you there.